Greetings to our Little Rock community. I'm Police Chief Keith Humphrey, and I'm both honored and privileged to serve the fine men and women of this city. We have 600 men and women who daily go out and do the right thing for our citizens of Little Rock. Let me first say that I'd like to pray for the family of Mr. George Floyd. I'm also wanting to pray for the city of Minneapolis. The reason why no city deserves that type of turmoil. As a police chief, when I look at that video, I become angered, I become disgusted, I become sick, and I become just emotional based on the fact that millions of people were able to see a human being die in his last moments of life at the hands of a law enforcement officer. There are going to be law enforcement officers that are going to be very uncomfortable with me saying what I'm saying, because there's always been, well, let's wait until the investigation is complete. I get that. The investigation must be completed. But let me say, as a police executive and a 32-year police veteran, I've always been taught, and we are taught in our profession, that once a person is under control, then de-escalation must take place. When a person's handcuffed and you have other officers around, you have more options to get that person under control. This doesn't mean if this person is actively being aggressive, which leads to the possible injury of the officers or further injury of that suspect. But when a person is completely under control, on the ground, on his stomach, with his hands handcuffed behind his back, it does not appear that he was causing any danger to those officers or to the community. That's why everybody's in such an uproar. There's nothing you can do to explain the actions of that officer. There's nothing we can say to justify the actions of that officer. I believe the things that are making the African American community more upset is because they watched the video, they heard the voices of not only the citizens, but also Mr. Floyd in his last moments of death, asking to be released, saying that he could not breathe. But at the same time, the community is being told, you really didn't see what you saw, which is an insult to a person's intelligence. As a police executive, I have to ensure that I'm honest with our community, that we're transparent. When things like this happen, although it did not happen here in Little Rock, I still have to let our community know that I see what's going on and I hear their concerns. People ask, can this happen in Little Rock? Well, let me just say this. With the training that we're providing our officers, with our focus on 21st century policing, our de-escalation tactics, with the professionalism that we have in this organization, I believe that this will not happen in our city. We continually monitor our training efforts. One of the things that I'd like for you to know is that as soon as this occurred, I sent out a group message to all of my supervisors in the department asking their opinion. 100% of the responses came back that they were very disappointed at what they saw, and they did not believe the actions of the officers were justified. No one is talking about what led up to that. No one had any comments regarding what happened before Mr. Floyd was handcuffed, because that's a different subject. It really doesn't matter what Mr. Floyd did. It comes down to the point of what occurred while he was handcuffed, while he was laying on the ground. Why did that occur? The only person that can answer that is the officer. I'm not calling for the prosecution of this officer, but I'm hoping that a complete and thorough and fair investigation is conducted. One of the things that we're focusing on here is emotional intelligence. Well, what's emotional intelligence? Before an officer can go out on the streets, they have to know where their level of emotions are before they encounter anyone. We're focusing on that. It's called the RITE training, R-I-T-E, Racial Intelligence Training and Engagement. We feel this is necessary for all of our officers, not just our recruits, but all of our officers to go through and try to understand how to address and how to adjust your emotions. If your emotions are on the lower level of the ladder, the rung of a ladder, which means that you're more likely to become upset and lose control. It's your responsibility as an officer, as an adult, to get it to the higher level to where you will be able to address the issues at hand. When people call us, they need our help. Part of our job, and the majority of our job, is to focus on those individuals who don't have the ability to protect themselves. That's why we're called peace officers, because that's what our job is, to focus on the peace. Now, that's my viewpoint from a law enforcement officer. Let me talk to you from my viewpoint of an African American male. I'm fortunate to wear two hats. I do wear the hat of a police chief, and but I'm also an African American male. I totally understand both sides. I understand that police are frustrated because there are over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the nation with over 1 million police officers, and less than 1% are the ones that are giving the entire profession a bad name. My hat goes off to these fine men and women who are doing the job, who care, who are passionate, who do have the emotional intelligence to do the job. Unfortunately, based on the history of law enforcement in the communities of color, when things like this happen, we take 20 steps backwards after taking 3 steps forward. And it's sometimes hard to recover. That's why we have to take a higher step, and we have to be better. We have to be better and better each day. We can't afford to make mistakes. I'm not saying we're perfect, but that's why we train. That's why we have discussions about these type of incidents, open discussions. It's a very difficult conversation to have as an African American police chief to a police department. It's very, because at times it appears that I am on the side of only African Americans. No, I'm on the right side. I am African American, and I understand the concerns. Now let me tell you why. I was born during civil rights. I remember the riots. I'm not saying that I was there, but I remember seeing the riots. I remember hearing my father, my grandfather talking about freedom riders and the encounters with law enforcement. I remember hearing about the movies, hearing about the incidents in Selma. I remember hearing about the Watts riots. I remember the Memphis riots. I remember talking about that and having deep discussions of all people remember were law enforcement officers with dogs or with batons. And so when I use this platform as not only a police chief but an African American police chief to make a difference, to ensure that the Little Rock Police Department doesn't have that reputation or doesn't have that stigma applied to them. I can talk honestly about it because I know I've had relatives who have lived through that. I remember that. Although vaguely, I do remember some of those things. I also remember the Rodney King situation. I was in law enforcement when that occurred. That was tragic. And during that time, I had some of my peers that felt that those officers hadn't done anything wrong. It split the police department that I was a part of that time, because you actually had white officers versus black officers and their opinions. But at the end of the day, no one could deny the fact that you had a human being. Wouldn't have mattered if they were black, white, or whomever, but you had a human being that had been beat into submission by law enforcement officers, and it was videoed. That was very disturbing. And so you fast forward to 2015, 2016, 2017, 18, and 19, it seems as though this continues to happen in the African American community. I can't explain it. I do know that some shootings are justified. I pride myself on being a student of the profession. So I study each and every one of these cases. And I will tell you that there have been these incidents that have been justified. But there have been those incidents that were not justified. And we must remember that at the end of the day, the person who was killed or who died was someone's father, someone's husband, someone's son, grandfather, nephew, niece, uncle, on whomever. It was a human being. And so we have to remember that. And that's my job, to remind the officers that are under my command that everyone we encounter are human beings. Now let's talk about it from being a grandfather of an African American male. Am I afraid for his safety? I'm concerned. I'm concerned because who knows? I'm concerned because my daughter is afraid that when her son goes outside to play, or if he's in the car with someone else, will he witness a tragedy? I wish I could tell her, promise her that that wouldn't happen. I can't. Only thing I can assure her is that the officers are well trained and that the majority of the officers, 99% of the officers doing their job, just want to do their job. But the thing about it is that less than 1% cause us 99% of the problems. And so to the parents, the only thing I can say is teach your children that the side of the road or inside of a car is not the place to hold court. Listen to the commands of the officers, comply with the commands of the officers. If there are any concerns with the officer's actions, then you have the right to make a police complaint. That's the way you get it started. That's the way we change things. Now, to our fine citizens of Little Rock, I want to assure each and every one of you all that on a daily basis that we have these difficult discussions regarding what communities feel about law enforcement. Let me say this, a lot of times the feelings of individuals are third hand, but it doesn't matter, because as long as they feel that way, that's a first-hand problem. We, as a police chief, I have to make sure that each and every man and woman on our department understands the oath that we took, that we understand the policies that we make sure that each and every one of them get and learn that they have to obey by those policies. Our main focus is procedural justice, fairness, and transparency. We are a 21st century policing department. I stand on that. I stand on the 6 pillars of 21st century policing. For the first time in the history of law enforcement, we finally have a component that deals specifically with officer wellness. Not so much the physical aspect of it, but the emotional and mental aspect of it. Because let's face it, police officers are human. Police officers have problems. Once they leave their shift, they go home to children, to wives, to mothers, fathers, friends, and whoever. They're human. They get emotional. And sometimes they just become overwhelmed. They need that outlet. And so for the first time, I'm proud to say that we have that outlet here in the city of Little Rock Police Department. We have a strong wellness program, so officers do have an out. That's amazing. Also, our training is one of the best in the state, and we'll continue to address the issues that come up. We want to remain cutting edge. But I want to assure the citizens of this city, as your police chief, I am monitoring the actions that are going on in Minneapolis. I understand. It does get frustrating when you see individuals not peacefully protesting. Don't damage the work that so many of our ancestors and that so many of the people who have come before us that have paved the way for us to be where we are today. Don't damage those legacies by damaging those properties. Remember, you do have a right to protest, but do so peacefully. You do have a right to express your concerns, but do so peacefully. I ask, and I challenge each of you to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you want to know how we're training officers and what we're doing to prevent these, please reach out to me. I welcome that. I want to have that face-to-face conversation. But you can rest assured that the men and women of this department take pride in protecting you, take pride in not being like several of the police departments in the nation that continually have problems. When we do see problems within the department, we focus on those immediately. So I wanted to take time to speak to you from the bottom of my heart. I felt it was very important for you to hear from me as the chief of police during these times, especially what's going on in the city, not in our city, but what's going on throughout the world. I pray that these things calm down very quickly. I also pray for the men and women on the front line and the citizens of those cities and the citizens of our city. So at this time, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak. And I'd like to say, may God bless the city of Little Rock, may God bless our county, and may God bless our state and our country. Thank you.